It is 6:30. I will call the meeting of the Delaware HPC to order. Clerk, could you call the roll, please?
Ms. Herring?
Here.
Mr. Nicely?
Here.
Ms. Riviera?
Here.
Ms. Van Gundy?
Here.
Councilman Rohr? Vice Chairman Coleman?
Here.
Chairman Hatton?
Here. It appears that Councilman Rourke is absent. My understanding from speaking with staff that is excused. He's in the middle of a trial. Seeing that, could I get a motion to approve his absence?
So moved.
A second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Could you call the vote, please?
Ms. Herring?
Yes.
Mr. Nicely?
Yes.
Ms. Riviera?
Yes.
Ms. Van Gundy?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Coleman?
Yes.
Chairman Hatton?
Yes. All right, number 2 on the agenda is the election of officers. We do not have a full body, so we will move that.
Well, Chairman Hatton, we probably won't have, we haven't had a full quorum, so it would be okay to proceed with the 6 of you.
Okay.
If you wanted.
Given that we have people here, why don't we move that to the end for
Okay.
under old business or
Sure.
new business? So let's move that down, which takes us to number 3, approval of motion summary of the HPC meeting held on July 24th, 2019, as recorded and transcribed. Everyone get a chance to look those over? If so, any comments, edits, deletions, additions? Seeing none, can I get a motion to approve, please?
So moved.
Need a second? Someone.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Would you please call the vote?
Ms. Herring?
Yes.
Mr. Nicely?
Abstain.
Ms. Riviera?
Yes.
Ms. Van Gundy?
Abstain.
Vice Chairman Coleman?
Yes.
Chairman Hatton?
Abstain. Just as a point of order, you were actually at that meeting, so you don't need to
Oh.
abstain. This is the July we're working on.
Never mind then,
That's all
sorry.
right. So do you want to?
Yep, then I approve that.
Okay. All right, which takes us then to summary minutes from the August 28th, 2019 meeting. Again, edits, corrections, changes, comments? Seeing none, motion to approve.
So moved.
A second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Call the vote, please.
Ms. Herring?
Yes.
Mr. Nicely?
Yes.
Ms. Riviera?
Yes.
Ms. Van Gundy?
Now I will abstain.
Vice Chairman Coleman? Chairman Hatton?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, number 5 on the agenda, regular business. 5A is 2018-2725, a request by Stacy and Dan Stultz for an informal review for a proposed facade renovation at 53 North Sandusky, which is Zone B2, Central Business District, and located in the downtown core of the Downtown Historic District overlay. Staff, do you have a report?
Yes, we do. As you mentioned, the property is located at 53 North Sandusky, between Central and Winter Street. It is zoned B2, Central Business District, and it is located in the downtown core of our historic district overlay. And this is an aerial of the property. Some background and historical information. The property is actually the south storefront of a contributing building in the National Register Sandusky Street Historic District. The building is known as 53 North Sandusky and 55 North Sandusky, and it was divided into separate parcels in the recent past. It's a circa 1870, 1880 era Italianate commercial architecture, which is the most popular style along South Sandusky. The south storefront, which is 53, retains ownership of the central stairwell, and the 1930 business directory shows 53 as occupied by Yealy Jewelry Store, while Champion Grocery Store occupied the north storefront. By 1952, Sherwin-Williams Paint Company occupied 53. And it placed a sign panel directly over the top of the flanking full plate glass storefront windows. And so that started the modification of the storefront. And presumably in the 1960s, Sherwin-Williams installed the modern aluminum storefront that exists today. And regrettably, after doing a structural investigation with the chief building official, it appears that all components of that original storefront were completely removed with that installation. And throughout time, since then, the storefront has been occupied by various retail businesses. We have in 1978, Flagger Interiors. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly. And as I mentioned, it was followed by the Outer Layer, a clothing store. And most recently, it was occupied by A Little Simplicity, which was a home goods retail store. And the building was sold to the applicants in 2017, and it had been vacant for approximately 2 years. And the applicants have been working diligently to improve the interior, and they are now ready to move to the exterior of the building.
Diane, is the photo in the lower corner, couldn't tell in my packet either, is that just a general
That-
shot of the interior?
Right, that is the interior,
Transom area?
yes, in the transom area. And that's to show the framing that's
Do you have
in
a
there now.
larger, can you expand that?
I'm not
It was
sure.
impossible to see in the packet, and it's,
I'm not sure
hard
we
to see
can expand or enlarge that
okay.
anymore.
It's kind of distorted.
Yeah, yeah, because it was a dark photograph to begin with.
Is it showing us damage? What is it showing us?
It's showing, you know, how the original storefront framing and so forth, you know, had been removed. And so this is the framing now that's supporting that, that awning.
Okay.
And so it's basically, you know, the just blocked out framing.
Okay.
Okay, and so these photographs show the current condition of the storefront. The upper, you know, we call it the sign band area. That's where transom windows had been or could be. And the canopy itself, the canopy in the original 1960s photo showed a flat roof, and this one appears to have a slight pitch roof installed on the top of it. And then at the lower levels, though it's brick face that had been installed along the lower edge. And then directly north or to the right of that storefront is the entry door to the stairway that leads up to the second floor. Okay, so the applicants are here today to present a proposal of some of the improvements that they would like to do to the existing storefront. Plans right now are to leave the awning in place and.
Canopy.
I'm sorry?
Canopy.
Or canopy,
Just be
correct,
clear, yeah.
right. And basically to try to minimize the appearance of that aluminum storefront and to try and make it blend better with the entire facade of the building. And the proposal is outlined on page 5 of the report. And then the applicants have also brought us a colored version of their proposal as well. And so to briefly going through the items that are listed in the staff report. Item 1 would be to install wood transom-style windows with wood trim above the storefront canopy and paint those wood surfaces. Replace the canopy roof, possibly with a standing seam metal roof, and cover and trim out the existing aluminum fascia with wood and paint that, and then scrape and paint the underlying canopy ceiling. Remove the aluminum column panels to the north and south of that storefront window, to expose underlying brick columns to complement the storefront base, and then to repair the brick and mortar on those columns as needed. Improve the storefront brick face base by installing inset wood panels, or possibly painting the brick face if that would be allowed. But staff did advise that any unpainted brick, shall not be painted in the district. Paint the aluminum mill finish on the storefront window trim and entry door in a color to complement the storefront color. And then paint the inset entry wall to the right of that entry door and the panel above the entry door to the second floor. Replace the exterior aluminum entry door to the second floor with a wood entry door with 50% glass. And repair the roofline area at the very top of the building with new coping, fascia boards, etc. And to paint the cornice corbels and all the window trim in a color to complement the storefront color. And right now, the paint colors, the final paint colors are yet to be determined, but the applicants are suggesting a charcoal black or a true black. And in terms of the storefront design, the applicants have provided 3 sketches with potential designs for the commission's comments and suggestions. So preference number 1 is illustrated here. And this is preference number 2. So you can see a variation in the transom window area and the trimming out of the canopy fascia. And then the third preference is illustrated here, which presents a plain canopy and fascia, and still presents a transom window look. Okay. And for staff analysis, the applicants do understand that the standards indicate that changes to a non-historic storefront should reflect the building's historic character. And ideally, that canopy should be removed and a new storefront constructed to reflect the original design, as depicted in the photographs. However, the applicants indicated that this would be an expensive undertaking at this point. And also removing the canopy and that framework would be invasive to the structural integrity. It would require, additional framing and so forth in order to hold up the brick above that storefront window area. And so the applicants are attempting to comply with the standards by leaving the canopy in place and downplaying the aluminum components of the modern storefront with the proposed modifications. And this approach would be more affordable at this point until the business can get established and, and down the road, perhaps, that canopy can be removed. But at this point, as we said, this would downplay the more modern aspects to that storefront, and then improve the aesthetics of the storefront, which would also help their business and improve the appearance of the entire building. And so with that, the staff is supportive of the project in this particular phase, as long as the proposed improvements, comply with the standards. And, after tonight, with HPC's suggestions and comments, they would come back for a formal application for the final determination. And so the building owners are here this evening as well.
Okay, commission members, any questions for city staff?
Not at this time.
Okay, a couple of things. We'll have the applicant step up, and if you would, name and address, she needs that for the record, so if you want to come on up. And if there's more than two, you can bring up more chairs. Yep, right there. So I'll wait till she's done, then I'll name and address, she needs that for the record.
Okay. Stacy Stoltz, 200 North Franklin Street, Delaware, Ohio, 43015.
Dan Stoltz, same address.
Thank you.
Okay, so this is an informal review. So, want it to be informal? I wore shorts just for the occasion. Interactive. We want to try and focus on what you have presented. Thank you for that. Also want to focus on the standards, right? And so one of the things I want to do, and I normally try and talk last, but I'm going to throw a couple of things out early. Because sometimes we've gone down this and we've spent an awful lot of time talking about design and those sort of things, only to at the end say, yeah, but it won't meet the standards, right? So I want to kind of skip through some of that in the sense that, assuming hopefully you've read the standards, a couple of things that are really going to be tough here, and that is the canopy. The standards expressly prohibit those, right? And if you look up and down Sandusky, you'll see I can't think, there's got to be one I'm missing. 20 years ago when the standards 22 or so went into place, there were some. The other thing is that one of the things that the standards calls for is, much like any standard, whether it's electrical or plumbing or whatever, it's if you're going to do work, you have to bring it up to code, in this case up to the standards, right? That's something that we have strongly adhered to for 20 plus years. And the reason being is, while it's very easy to say, but it looks better than it did, that doesn't get us to where the standards are, right? And it's been tough. I've been on this board for almost 20 years, and it's always tough, right? Because there's economic, it's people's livelihoods. But by sticking to that, we have the downtown that you see where, I was invited to speak at Preservation Ohio, when people are coming up to me from a lot of towns the size of Delaware smaller, going, how did you guys do this? I'd like to take credit for it, but it was council, it was a lot of things that got us to where we are today. So I just want to make sure that we don't get too far down a rabbit hole of saying, hey, this is a nice design, and this is really maybe more for commission members. Let's remember what the standards are. Let's remember that, at least in the past, we've always had people improve up to the standards and not shortcut them. And the last thing I'll say, just because you use the word a lot, Diane, and where at my job, one of the things we always talk about, there's phase one, and then the next phase is phase never. My house is full of those, by the way. You get it to just kind of where it does, and you never get back to it. And that's where we've really held a firm line because of that. So with all that as a preface, why don't I turn it over to you guys? Tell us about your project, tell us what you'd like to do, and then commission members, feel free to ask questions.
Okay, so, in the packet that we provided for you guys, some of it's duplicate, so I
This one?
apologize,
Okay,
yes.
thank you.
And I tried to just go through the work description and then label, right after that, the color photo. With the sketches that were presented as option 1, 2, and 3, we really have just been creatively brainstorming about how to improve the aesthetic of the building. So any of these components can kind of be intermixed.
Like an à la carte menu.
Yeah,
Okay.
right,
Well,
so, just because we say that's number 1, like, we might say, well, no standing seam roof, or we might say we like that, but we like, so we can, pick and pull from the different options. I think the other part of it is, as Diane mentioned, we're not stuck on I can't show you like a Sherwin-Williams like color, but we
That's
do
fine.
love the idea of like a green black, a charcoal black, going back to the historic time period. And a lot of the sketches that you see where we do show the trimming out of the wood pieces, specifically on the one where we show it on the canopy, those were elements that we brought in based on looking at the historical pictures from when the, actually before Sherwin-Williams put the big sign over a most beautiful storefront. So, we were trying to bring in some of those ornate decorative elements with what is existing, to Diane's point, to, help us economically improve it without structurally having to change everything. I think one of my questions would be, when you guys say, is it no canopy, or is it like, cause would we have to go back to a center entrance and no canopy? And, cause those are things that would even put us not only more economically in a tough situation, but it would actually really impact our business model and what we do. Like, we have a whole seating area in the front that if we went to a center entrance, we would lose capacity, we would lose an element of what our business is actually doing. So just those were some questions that I had kind of running through my head as you were speaking, Mark, and
Okay.
just, wanting to understand, like, what are the non-negotiables and what
Okay.
are the,
So the standards expressly prohibit canopies.
Okay.
Awnings are okay, but not canopies. We've never had anything where we've really pushed door relocation.
Okay.
We understand, particularly with a smaller storefront, if you have something in the middle, you get 2 tiny spaces. Maybe it works for a restaurant. I can think of a lot of those kind of places that have a couple little tables up there. But I've been in your space and I know what you use it for, so I fully understand that. I can't speak for all of the commission members, but to my knowledge, there's nothing in the standards that is that specific. It wants you to attempt to, and I want to be careful with my words. It doesn't require that you replicate history, right? In fact, to a degree, sometimes the standards really don't want you to do that. They want you to pay homage, for lack of a better word, right? So it should fit in. But for instance, if your old storefront was individually pieces of leaded glass that would cost you, $50,000, like, we have some buildings that have beautiful transoms that are leaded glass, that's where you kind of get into that cost prohibitive sort of thing. And that's one more thing to keep in mind, and this is always the tough part about our job. The standards, when they talk about economics, they're not really talking about your economics, right? And because they can't legislate that. So it's more along the lines of, if we were, I'll pick on German Village a little bit, for the long, and they still do, to my knowledge, they still require slate roofs. Well, now that the houses are worth, $500,000 for a tiny bungalow, people can afford $50,000 re-slates. Back when they were $100,000, they still required them. And I would argue that that's probably economically burdensome. But keep in mind that that's really what that standard is about, the value of the building versus the end value after, not so much what your pocketbook looks like. I know it's kind of hard to talk about. But yeah, so to my knowledge, the standard's saying nothing about that. I can't think of anything that we would
Yeah, I
personally ever
mean,
talk about.
I guess the way I'm thinking of it too is, with respect to the standards, is, you know, the center of door versus side door placement isn't necessarily incongruous with the architectural style of the building or the surrounding buildings. The canopy is, it's, you know, that really sticks out, and I was trying to go through my, you know, mental image
I was
of
looking at
downtown.
stuff coming down.
The
And
hair,
I
the hair
couldn't-
salon,
What's that?
the hair salon right next to Witt's, I believe they still have a canopy.
Yeah,
They might, yeah.
Pardon?
Son of
Yeah.
Thurman.
Thurman
Yeah.
does, yeah.
yeah, there aren't too many of them
No.
left, but, yeah, but I mean, that, to me, that's, you know, that's really probably the heart of what the standards are getting at is, you know, getting, you know, not perpetuating something that is absolutely incongruous, you know, with the surrounding architecture, the historic architecture, of the district. And again, I think the placement of the door is probably not, I mean, I don't think that's a big impact on it, but the canopy certainly is.
Okay, so at the end of the day, right, our goal is to come back here 30 days from now and say, we knocked their socks off. Everyone says yes, and we're gonna move on. If it means the canopy goes bye-bye, structurally, it's cantilevered. Is it first name basis? Are we-
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So Joe, I noticed you looked at the picture there, it was a little dark.
Yeah.
Just to give you a reference of what that was, there's a steel beam that was put in,
Mhm.
which is where the bottom of the canopy is, and then another steel beam up above. The vertical framing is just to support that in between. Some of it was the original that was there before, and then they had additional framing. And so when Jerry came in and looked at it
Yeah.
with us, he said, you just have to make sure there's no deflection if you pull that out. Well, I wouldn't pull anything out. I would just shift things over
Yeah.
if we do the windows. That canopy is cantilevered off of that steel beam. So in theory, if you guys all said, hey, that thing has to go, because we don't want to not do anything, right? We all agree that the building is tired, it needs some love, and this needs to be like a total team effort here, because we want to get something approved instead of it not to have anything happen at all.
Sure.
And so if that means that that has to disappear, it can be done, and then replace that with some sort of transom windows, leaded glass, whatever that may be. Because I'd love to blow our budget on leaded glass. Because as you know, it can really make or break.
Right.
But even just down to the details of just getting the brick cleaned. I mean,
Right.
there was a fire there years and years and years ago. There's still soot on the brick.
Right.
And so we want to do it justice.
Yeah.
And
I was gonna say, leaded glass would be great and everything like that, but just looking through the supplementary packet that you had proposed, and I know, I assume it was more of a, this is, kind of what we're gonna,
Just
how we're gonna
exam-
treat the, framing and stuff, but I think just that cleaner look without a canopy, if you could do something like that, even if, maybe the leaded glass truly is a phase two.
Right.
But something like that, I just think.
You're looking this one,
I-
yeah.
Well, I was looking actually at
Oh,
the
but
picture
yeah,
that you
that,
used as an
yeah,
example.
Yeah,
And I think, if you could do something like that, it doesn't have the canopy, and I think, that would actually be very, I think it would transform.
Are you looking at the show in Williams?
it's the,
No, it's this picture right here that was in the supplementary packet.
So see, it would, that's what basically this would look like without the canopy.
Yeah.
Right.
And so, I think if you could, because again, my biggest hangup, I think, of everything would be the canopy.
Okay.
And again, just because it really is something that we've held other applicants to in the past that have brought projects, and we probably have never had a project or an application brought to us that wasn't under some kind of, varying degrees of budget constraints. Most of them are pretty, very budget conscious. I mean, nobody comes in here thinking, it's no problem to add, an extra $5,000 to it or whatever. But we have held people in the past to that, you know, that's one of the mechanisms as, you know, Mark, well, I was gonna say Chairman Hatton, but Mark alluded to, is that really is the mechanism that has actually transformed what had been a pretty tired and worn downtown 25 years ago, when I first moved to town, or 24 years ago, to what you've got down here now, because that really has been a mechanism that, you know, it's been gradual. I mean, it literally has been over a 20-some-odd year period of time, so it, you know, it doesn't seem, you know, it wasn't instantaneous, and so it just, you really have to look at old pictures around the 1990s, I guess early 1990s, to see what that, you know, that standard has done. But that's the tool that has actually gotten the downtown to the state it's in right now, where, you know, it is such a desirable, you know, location to, you know, to have a business and for people to, you know, shop and dine. So, you know, not to, you know, belabor the point that Mark has already gone over, though I think that's probably, to me, the key, you know, issue with the proposal.
We're not married to the canopy.
Yeah.
And the way I look at it, sounds like we all want to get rid of the canopy.
Well, it's what the standards call for.
And that's fine, we can do that. I look at it as addition by subtraction, right? I don't have to paint or do wood trim or put a standing seam metal roof on the canopy, right?
Right,
If
and-
that thing just goes bye-bye.
Yeah, I don't mean to
Yeah,
interrupt, but
it's okay.
because you said that, and because I see the pictures, and because we've had this over the last 2 weeks, the standards call for standing seam metal roofs. I'm sure we could do a flat seam as well.
Okay.
But that's hand bent, not the barn siding that you have
Right.
here. Because I bring that up because we've had 2 cases in the last couple of weeks, and I get that this stuff, when you go to Menards, they call it standing seam. It's
Mhm,
not.
It's not.
And so the pictures you've included here are that. So that would not be applicable in the downtown. So now, if you get somebody out here to do a standing seam or probably a flat seam with that low slope, that's a fairly significant amount of money
Sure it
these
is.
days, because there's not very many people who do it anymore.
Okay, so,
So-
when we come back next month, I'm sorry.
Did you wanna say?
No, go ahead,
Okay.
please, thanks.
When we come back next month, we're gonna show that flat, right?
Okay?
And you rein me in here, but so that we bring it back, I have questions like, how many sections of windows? Are we talking 3? Are we talking 4?
Transom or storefront?
Well, it would basically replace from the bottom of the canopy to the top of the canopy. I don't have that dimension, but I think it's somewhere in the range of 4 feet tall.
So on a normal building, that would be a lintel. And so there are some potential, and you know the terms better than I do, but if you go up to the Hayes building, that's not all limestone or sandstone. There is potential. So if we look at your building next door to the north, it's kind of hard the way they've got it painted, but you can see there's the lintel,
Yeah.
and then you've got the kind of panels. So normally you would have a lintel, because in the old days, that's what was holding everything up. Now I realize you got steel beams in there now, right?
Right, and that's right there in
Yeah,
the lower
so-
left. There's a steel beam at the top and at the bottom. So where that lintel is on the Allstate building, our steel beam sits,
Is it
it's
outside?
recessed. No,
So it's recessed, so you could do,
it's flush.
so you could do a lintel
It
there.
would just be about a foot taller than theirs, but absolutely. So then above that, and then up to where you'd see the green or the gray.
Yeah, well, it
flashing.
wouldn't even, it wouldn't have to even be a foot taller, because you've got the framing for your transoms, which would hide that, right?
Right.
Help me out if I'm
Yes.
going all
No, you're
crazy,
fine.
because she's an
Hey,
architect.
Diane, could you go back to an older photograph that shows there you go. He was talking about that band
Yeah.
right
Yes.
there. So that band doesn't exist, but using the proportion of that band in some kind of detail
Okay.
to reference back to that historic
Which is what,
element, and then the transom below that, I
Okay.
think, is
Yeah.
what you're talking about?
Mhm.
Yeah,
That's
so, and that can be wood with panels, that can be, help me out, what's the stuff they use up on the Hayes building called?
IFAS?
What is it?
IFAS?
There you go, which is fake limestone or sandstone, whichever. we prefer real materials, but in that case, you probably can't shave a piece of limestone down and mount it up there. But that looks to me like that was probably wood with, you know, some dimension to it, which I think would look really nice.
Well, and that's like what, I mean, I know we're, like,
The other thing
that's-
that's interesting while you're looking at that, Stace, is there is an old section of that in the basement.
Awesome.
That I could pull out and take some photos of and bring that as an example next month.
Yeah.
That we
Wow.
could try to recreate best
Yeah.
as possible.
That would be great.
So
Which I
just,
think would be
just to
cool.
be clear,
would be very nice.
that would be awesome, but we're not gonna tie your hands to that, so, cause I know you're looking for pictures, we don't wanna have fights here. So, I mean, if you feel like something else ties in, what we really want is just something that creates that lentil. That's great because it has dimension to it, right? And so, I think that's what really, if you wanna replicate what was there, I think that's fantastic. But if you kind of say, hey, what we really want are, if we go back to the one of your, sorry, it's too much stuff. If you really kinda like to follow up something like that, that's fine too.
Right.
You know, whatever, we try not to get too far down the rabbit hole as far as dictating design, right? It needs to be, complement the Italianate design that we have. So it wouldn't be right if you said, hey, we'd like to put Greek columns up or something, right?
Okay.
But, so that's really what we're looking for.
It's more
and-
about proportions.
Yeah,
than
exactly,
exact
scale,
detail. Yeah.
proportion.
And along that line, I would say if that idea of having a lintel, the existing main storefront windows, but then some transoms, in that original photo there on the left, those storefront windows are much taller than they
Yeah.
currently are, right? And so
Right.
it would
No, there's no
also,
transoms, yeah.
yeah, it would still doesn't have transoms, right? And it would, so it would bring back that spirit of what that originally looked like too.
well, and I love the idea of more light coming on the inside too,
Mhm.
so.
Yeah, based on what you guys
Yeah.
have in there.
Yeah.
What-
And just to be clear, there would be a steel beam below the transoms that was previously carrying the canopy, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. What's your opinion about the brick columns that flank the left and the right that are covered in that galvanized metal
What are they originally?
How much
They're a
damage
brick.
would that
They
do?
should be a brick.
to the brick?
Yeah.
By removing it, they're already falling off.
They are.
Not much. I can't guarantee that the brick is in, the brick should be fine, but it's probably gonna need to be, you know, stripped out and remortared and all that, which
Yeah.
obviously we would do.
Yeah.
Can I also, just while we're on the brick, so the brick that is down low that we were, suggesting to cover, the reason why is that it is not at all near it does
No,
not
that
look like
was-
the
Right.
existing brick.
That's just
And
a
it looks fake
brick
in it,
facade.
right?
Yeah.
Only
So-
because it is.
Yeah, so, that's why we were saying if we could trim it out with wood panels or do something pretty,
Yeah, if you look next door, that's what they did, and this is an area where we actually have decided that we will allow man-made materials, so you can use a, you know, Trex or that type of material, hardy plank, because of the fact that it's close to the ground for moisture. And although you're on you don't get as much sun as the other side of the street does. So that's not unusual, or, you know, if you think of, where I guess Hotheads went into, right? Who had the Carrera glass? Oh, Hamburger Inn has the Carrera glass. But then you have damage or potential damage, you know, skateboarders, whatever, so, yeah, I would be more than pleased to see you cover that up.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, so we'll go wood over
Yeah.
that, and then we're gonna expose the galvanized metal.
And you could also, if you want, I think, again, speaking for myself, but I think it would be accurate to wrap those brick columns in a nice, again, especially if it had some depth and dimension to it, wood, you know, that could play off the panel design that you're using elsewhere. That may not be perfectly accurate, although, I don't know, I'll bet if we look down through some of the old photos, they would be.
so instead of exposing the brick columns, cover them in wood is what you're saying, is that what
Yeah,
you're
cause
saying?
can you
Yeah.
flip back to the old one? I'm sorry, you keep asking me to do that. It's hard to see in these old photos, but
I think that's brick, but, here.
if it's brick, then
It
it's
is.
painted, which would be unusual back then.
Oh, yeah,
Cause you can't see any mortar joints where at least you kinda can. I
I
don't know.
think I can in the
So,
Sherwin-Williams.
Yeah, this.
A king on
I can
that?
see more than the
Yeah,
Sherwin-Williams.
like, yeah.
I think so,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, that looks
all
like
right.
brick.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I think it comes down to what do you got underneath the aluminum
And if it's
presently?
not, right.
Am I allowed to do a little exploratory, remove those carefully? And-
Yeah,
and-
we don't want you to start doing stuff without a permit, but you know,
That's-
if you peel, we get it. You
Right.
Peel back and
Okay.
look. You gotta know what's there.
Yeah, I mean, in a perfect world, if you peel that off and it comes down to, you know, you can replace a few bricks and have it, you know, repointed and, you know, bring back that element of the storefront,
Yeah.
you know, that would be great.
Okay.
I mean, I think that would be a tremendous, you
Well, and
know,
then you got a non-maintenance item once it's done.
yeah,
which is
yeah,
nice.
but if you peel that off and it's just a complete disaster, you know, then I think you gotta look at other options.
Okay.
So if we do this, it sounds like if we get rid of the canopy, we've got work to do anyway. So that sort of leads us to doing the lintel, at least transoms from what you're saying. You may want to do the full height. Again, we're okay with the door, I think, being on the side. We understand that. And then from so are we looking at that point to redo, because we're almost there, to redo the rest of the storefront and get rid of the aluminum mill finish?
Well, phase one would be to use an all-surface enamel, rough the surface, and paint it whatever color everyone agrees to.
Right.
The plate glass, it's seen better days. It's probably put in the 50s. It's
Yeah.
not energy efficient. I'd love to get, you know, insulated glass panels in there and redo it all. That, to me, down the road seems like the easiest thing to do, being that it's
Okay.
on ground level.
It's not structural.
It's not structural, but that would probably blow our budget for sure.
Okay. And that's, you know, Joe alluded to it, kind of, we were joking about with the leaded glass. You can put flat panels in for cheap and do leaded glass later, right? So if you do the structures, I would love to see you do it all at one time, but I think from what we're talking about tonight would get us, and again, we try not to do, say, hey, you know, yeah, but because of the fact that the storefront, you couldn't redo it from code, but we can't make you take it out, right? So it's grandfathered in. I've never had an instance where we've said you couldn't paint something.
Especially a milled aluminum finish.
Right, because milled aluminum is
Nobody goes
expressly
out, right?
prohibited, so, yeah, I mean, just don't spend a ton of money like trimming out below.
Right, right, okay. Do you guys have any opinion about lighting on the facade? Because as it is now, we've got 4 can lights in the canopy. The electric's there, the switching is there. We've had some upgrades on the interior, and we've taken care of some of that, i.e. gooseneck fixtures, something to light the street, the walkway.
Yeah, so goosenecks are okay. We have approved, like, not, obviously not on your canopy, but in your doorway, there's quite a few that have can lights. They're not my favorite, but I understand why they're there for some folks. But yeah, goosenecks look nice, and I'm not sure what you have for signage.
It's shown there.
Yeah, I've got it on some of them. If you do a projecting sign, which you're allowed to do.
That would probably stay, cause it's on the left and the right.
Okay,
Yeah, it's on the sketch.
so you can do gooseneck lighting on that too.
Yep.
You've got, and I don't know what you want to do, but you also have, you know, your glass front for signage as well.
Right.
Area there, so.
Would you prefer if the goosenecks were on the lower end of the windows versus on what we're calling the lintel?
You could even do like a downward light, just so it's down, you don't have to, like a sconce.
Like a downward sconce.
That would be pretty too.
Okay.
We're generally have been pretty open on lighting.
Okay.
The standards have a couple of things. The one thing I will say that we're trying, and it's hard in the standards because now so many things are LED, is trying to stay away from the bright white, like the 6,000K LEDs, which look like, you know, Audi headlights,
Right.
right? And trying to get people back down to like a 2700, which is kind of what a normal light bulb looks like. Other than that, from a, gosh, I can't think of a time though, I mean, I suppose somebody, if they put something like a, you know, mercury vapor security light out, but I can't, in my knowledge, in my time here, I don't know that we've really had that issue.
Okay.
Yeah.
So warm white,
Yeah.
3,000
warm lighting.
Kelvin, 2,700, something like that.
And
I-
So one of the,
look
I
around the
didn't
downtown,
interrupt.
get a sense,
Have you thought about an awning? You
No.
know,
I think if the canopy was gonna go away, we like the idea of a
Yeah.
flat
Okay, all right.
storefront.
a lot of people like it because of shelter,
Yeah.
right? And I know sometimes with what you guys do there, people are stepping out to smoke and that sort of stuff, so.
Right. I mean, we have thrown, I mean, because this is informal, but
That's
we
fine,
have
yeah.
thrown the idea of creating a space out front. I don't know what that means, or like if that is another face, or if that has to be, but because of what we do.
Yeah.
When we were talking about the canopy, we were saying that that is why we
So like
like
a
it.
sidewalk cafe,
Right.
okay, yeah. They can probably answer more questions. We put it in our standards, so we look at the design
Yeah.
part, but Diane and the rest of the staff, they're the ones that have the applications.
And that came up later after we'd already spent time
Yeah.
getting it thought through, but I don't know, maybe is that something that could be added later if we did an
Yeah.
outdoors,
Mhm.
okay.
Yeah,
So back to the structural part there, it looks as if the lighter wood that you see is the newer framing that was added, and the older, darker in between is the original. So in a perfect world, there would be 4 windows,
Mhm.
and we would beef up the old and shift things over.
Right.
All the
Okay.
while, obviously, bring a structural engineer and make sure everything's okay to do it that way. And, well, whether we use PSLs or whatever on the vertical, and the dimension may change slightly if we go from a 6x6 to an 8x8, just to make sure there's no deflection in that beam. 4 equal windows would be ideal. Is that okay?
I would say architecturally, 3 windows would be ideal that
See that.
follow the proportions of the windows above, like the bays that the second
Mhm.
Okay.
floor windows
I see
provide.
that.
Is that possible?
I understand that there are structural issues
Yeah.
too, but if that's something you could have a conversation with your contractor about and
Mhm.
see if it's an easy thing or if it's gonna be prohibitive, then sometimes you have to work out other solutions.
Okay, well, I'll have that
Okay.
answered by the time we come back next
Yeah.
month. I'll have him come out and take some measurements and do his calculations. Then we can let the engineering kind of determine the architecture. Is that
Yeah.
okay?
Yep,
Okay.
that does have to happen.
Yeah, and feel free, I'll volunteer staff, feel free to work with Diane and
Yeah,
staff.
they have been.
You know, since this is informal, she can informally send me emails. We do administrative approval on a lot of these, which means either myself or if I'm gone, Joe, they say, hey, here's the roofing material they want to do. We're trying to save people from small projects from having to come in front of an HPC every time, right? So, we've got that channel down, so feel free, bounce stuff off. Dave can get involved, he knows more. Obviously, you've worked with Jerry already, so, yeah, I think it will, I appreciate you guys being very open. I was a little reading through the packet, I was like, oh, I hate these things, so
Mhm.
I'm glad, cause I know what you guys do there, and I think, I agree with you. I mean, I don't know if anybody doesn't go to an event there because your storefront's ugly, right? But maybe somebody goes, oh, that'd be an awesome place
Yeah.
to have an event there because it looks really neat,
Yeah.
right? So I'm fully on board with that, and I think from what we talked about tonight, I think it would be a complete turnaround. It would be, it would be great, so. What else? We've bounce off, let us know.
How specific, or like, how much do you guys weigh in on colors, and is that?
The only thing the standards talk about is non-garish colors and that you can't create, so with a business that recently opened that their colors were their logo, that's prohibited in the standards. I don't think that's gonna happen, right?
Right.
So you're on the right track. Generally, the white wouldn't be,
Right.
the eyes were dark.
Yeah, and it
as
wouldn't
I said, so-
necessarily prevent you, if you didn't, you know, completely dial into what color you were gonna go with, it wouldn't prevent the application from being approved.
Yeah.
You could always do the colors pending administrative approval,
Okay.
so you can keep the project
Okay.
moving. And then once you figure that out, it's a pretty simple step to get it
Yeah.
approved.
Great.
So
You
up
don't
on,
have to come back.
Right.
yeah,
Okay.
and then up on your top cornice, that's just gonna be repair, right?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
proceed.
some of the flashing is,
Okay.
just needs to be, repaired and then obviously, scraped, painted with the color scheme. And the
Okay.
windows are, believe it or not, they're still in pretty good shape, but they need addressed. So we're gonna have that all done. We'll probably
Okay,
bring a
great.
lift in, but it'd be a heck of a lot easier to get a lift in there with that canopy gone, to be honest with you. So
That's
we
true.
won't have to fight that, so.
Cool.
I love the idea. I was a little nervous about it, but we're gonna save a lot of money by not doing the things to the canopy that would appease everybody, and it sounds
Right.
like no one wants it anyways, so let's just get rid of it.
Excellent.
Cool?
Great.
Okay.
Anything else? Anything else from commission members?
No, just thank you for, you know, your project. I think it's gonna be a really nice improvement for downtown.
Cool, great.
Yeah.
Thank
Look
you.
forward to seeing you next
Seeing it.
month.
All
Okay.
right, thank you.
Hey, thank you.
All right. I think we can jump into 5B, since if we're kind of saying we've got a full commission. But I do want to just jump in. I noticed a couple people in the audience. Is there anybody here to talk? We normally do new business, but I try and keep everybody's schedule. Did you have any?
Steve and Judy Hartman, Wade recently purchased 4 North.
Can you come up and make sure it's in the microphone, because it gets recorded?
Where's the microphone?
No, right here, right where they were.
Just your name and address, please.
Into the
My
microphone.
personal address or my property address?
Property's fine.
4 North Sandusky Street. And that was Steve and Judy Hartman.
Thank you.
Recently purchased that, that's where the Green Door Salon is.
Okay.
We're gonna be here next month, working with Diane already to put together a package for you. Glad to hear that you're more concerned about the building than the budget. That's one of my main concerns here, whether or not I'm going to do anything at all, or just leave the building the way it is, because if you're not concerned, if you care about somebody's budget, then it's not gonna help me.
Right.
So I appreciate it.
Okay, good.
But, we just, lived in Sunbury for 35 years, come over here a couple of times, been here more times in the last 2 months than we have in our life. So we're starting to get to know the area. We don't know all the buildings, we don't know all the people. I'm starting to see like Diana around quite a bit. And now I'll probably recognize you guys on the street.
Okay.
So we'll be back next month.
Great.
And we have plans to change out the storefront, which you've already looked at in the past and
Mhm.
approved, but we're going to do something similar along the same lines. And then I also have some other things that we want to do that I think would improve the building for the area.
Okay.
So we'll discuss those next week. But based on things that came up tonight here, you mentioned IFAS cast stone?
Yes.
IFAS is a brand name?
Well, no,
What is IFAS?
no, IFAS is more like a stucco finish.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And cast stone, so stucco is something you put on cast stone.
Yeah,
something
it's
formed.
more of a, yeah, it's more of a shaped, it's foam, and then it has kind of a stucco finish. So, but the foam comes in the profile that you're looking for, and then you
And then you finish it. Okay,
finish it off
gotcha.
with.
Yeah, I've seen a
Right.
lot of that around the world.
Yeah, so if you go up to like the Hayes buildings, the 2 county buildings, they have that.
Right, it goes by the initials of
sorry.
EIFS.
EIFS.
Mhm.
I knew it was an acronym for something.
Yes.
Okay, great.
But that's been used in commercial, because the further away you are from it, the better.
I'm very familiar with what it is, I didn't know the name.
Okay.
Okay,
So
so then,
we-
if you don't mind me taking
No.
5 minutes here.
Yeah, no.
The idea of cast stone, looking at the HPC parameters, there's a few discrepancies as far as nomenclature, vernacular, needs maybe a little bit reorganized for somebody like me that is looking through and not sure what's core or historic, and using different names for things, and then new versus old construction. So I have this building, that overlooks William Street. It's got a wall on it, and I wanna add some windows, which may or may not be available. Is that new construction or
No,
restoration?
so you're in the core district, and it's old construction. New construction would be, Smoked, which is next to 12 West. That used to be the old, West End Grill, and it burned down.
It's
So that
infill
was-
construction, basically.
What's that?
Right.
Infill
Yeah,
construction,
yeah.
basically.
So
So
totally,
it's
totally
Whole,
rebuilt.
yeah, whole new
Yeah,
building.
yeah.
So this would be renovation to add a window.
Yes.
Okay, so in we discussed this with Diane, and she gave me some information, but we're not 100% sure on. Because it's renovation and it's in the core area, would cast stone be allowed as a replacement of limestone on new windows that are being added?
Is it?
Where would you be using that? Cause the lintel should still be there.
No, there's no, we're adding
Window.
windows for
So they're
possibly.
adding
Oh,
window.
okay.
Totally new window
Where?
on the
'Cause-
side of the building that overlooks, William Street.
Right,
Actually-
this is the
So it
south.
overlooks the solar
right.
saloon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, the south
Right.
elevation.
Yeah, normally we wouldn't allow windows to be added.
Okay,
So we don't allow windows to be closed up or windows to be punched in.
okay.
That's-
Normally.
Well, yeah, I mean, the standards don't allow for that. So when I say we, it's the standards which are actually based on the Secretary of the Interior in the US. So like, US, state down to us. So that's always been something.
Okay, so in this
that's-
case, we don't even need to present anything about adding a window on there.
You can, but I can tell you that's been pretty much a non-starter in the
Okay.
past. If you can just look around the downtown, you can see there's none of that.
Well, I don't know which ones have been added over the past. There are some buildings like ours that have a side structure that has many windows in it. There's some that have 0 windows.
Right.
We have 2, but keeping in spirit of changing times and, maintaining the architecture and the nature of the area, but also thinking in terms of, instead of having a warehouse there, you might wanna be able to have, office space or, in addition, more critically, a domicile apartment. If I can't put a window in there, then I'm stuck with 1 bedroom. If I can put a window in, now I have the option of 2 bedroom.
Right.
Which gives me a better utility for the area because it's fewer parking spots, which to me is a major issue as far as how much money I wanna put into this project. If everybody puts in an office space and nobody puts in apartments, then I'm not gonna do anything because where are my people gonna park?
Right.
You know, and
Yeah,
it's-
so we haven't allowed those sort of changes, so I wouldn't foresee that happening. If my memory serves me right, there's a ghost sign there too, which is
Yeah, the
protected.
beehive.
Mhm.
So the ghost signs are are called out again in the standards as protected.
Yeah.
Okay, no consideration for the fact that they're going to be gone eventually and the building might still be there.
Nope.
Okay. All right, transom, as far as the transom windows above the lintel, would it be, possibly correct that in the past, historically before we had adequate lighting, those windows were there for lighting and there would be maybe an awning at the transom level? And so today, from an architectural standpoint, the transom windows are not as important as they would have been.
Yeah, so if you look, I don't know if you can go back to any of the really old photos, the awnings are probably, I don't know my awning history that much, but if we go back to, the 1880s, I doubt you'll see many, if at all, and even that's, so you can see like there's a little bit of one on whatever Bob Burns is there. But go back, do we have anything of the really old ones?
I've seen some pictures where there's been, yeah, well, there's this one, where Boston
Yeah, so it's
Storage-
1950. But yeah, to your point, generally the buildings were built without the idea of an awning being on them. And the transoms were either lights, some of them opened up, so they provided additional ventilation, just like inside of a house. And then as people went through and decided, hey, we want to give a little more protection to people either standing in line or walking down the sidewalk, awnings took place. Over the course of time, they sort of also morphed into signage. And so if you look up and down our downtown, you see an awful lot of cloth awnings, probably for all of those reasons.
Yeah.
But with that being said, the transom windows still look really cool inside, right? So
Oh, yeah, they do I'm just looking at it from a philosophical change in need for the buildings.
Mhm.
We don't want them, I don't want my building to be the same way it was in 1882 when it was built, because it would have no use today. not too many people are gonna make cigars, so we don't need that space, but we do need apartments. And then the stores, it's not just for me, but just in understanding the theory of the way everything works here, I could see where those windows would be obsolete from a light standpoint, and they might be more turned into tile mosaics or solid panels with signs on them, that kind of stuff. So, not that I'm going to do that. Just
Yeah, I was just
thinking.
trying to think, you know, in the time that I've been on here, I don't know how long, if you've been, what, near 20, it's probably been close to 15 for me or so, but I don't think we've ever had an applicant cover up a transom window, so.
A lot of uncovered.
Yeah, a lot uncovered, but
Real
today,
quick.
you know, at least, you know, the time that I've been on here, I don't recall that we've ever had any covered up.
Mhm.
So that would be, I mean, basically, at least in the 15 years or so that I've been on here, that's new territory.
Well, the standards don't allow new windows to be punched in or old ones to be covered up, so you could definitely argue that transom windows are windows and they would be allowed to be covered up.
Okay, in my case, I do have a panel on it, there are no windows. Historically, I believe there were windows. Because the windows haven't been there for 50 years, that mean I can't put them back in?
No, it means
No,
you
no, you
can,
can't.
but it
You
doesn't
don't
mean you
have
have to.
Yeah.
Okay. 'Cause we currently have plans that were already submitted and approved that have the windows in it, but recently here I've been thinking maybe not put those windows in and do something more creative with the facade. That, instead of ended up having everything look exactly the same, take something that somebody would have done back then if they had the money. As opposed to just say, let's do it all the same because that's how much they were, that's what their budget was for the store, maybe, accentuate it a little bit. So, I guess that's all. While we're talking about things that we can't do, one thing that Diana and I talked about, are decks on the building back here, on the back, above 5 William Street. We have 2 stories, and I was looking to put some decks off of the back, 2nd and 3rd floor. The width of the building is about 10 foot deep.
I mean, I think there are several examples downtown where decks have been added to upper stories, you know, that are not visible from the street. I mean,
These would definitely be visible.
Yeah.
Pine fresh.
I'm sorry. I
They'll be
thought-
100% visible. You know, I mean,
Prime entry into,
please?
Okay.
and it's the main entry into Delaware as well, that,
Right.
that view.
Right.
So that's not something that would be entertained.
Usually not, but that's unusual, so it's not something that pops up very much.
Okay.
The ones that have popped up were already there from 30 years ago.
Yeah.
So I can think of one, I'm not great with addresses, but the building where like April and Fran lived, there was
Yeah.
just kind of a deck, but it's on a roof.
Yeah.
So you could go back out, and then it was also the egress.
Well, there
for
was one that was
fire.
just recently that was
It's,
approved,
at
for.
the antique store.
Yeah, but, you know, what used to be, Pilsner's,
Yeah.
Right, and died.
yeah, but there again, that one's not visible from the street view, so, you know, that's kind of a different case.
And it's on an existing roof, right? Is that what it
Yes.
is? Okay.
Yeah, mine would be, the lower level would be on the existing roof and then have a 2nd level at the 3rd floor level. But, that's, I mean, there are other roofs that basically have a roof with a railing around them. I've seen many of them in historic pictures here. I don't think any of them exist, or maybe, there is actually one down the street on one of the newer buildings. But, this would be definitely visible from the street. It
Right.
would architecturally, I think, enhance the building, maybe not with, in the parameters of the HPC.
Yeah.
But if
And
somebody
I-
was building the building today, it would definitely have that balcony on there, it would not be built without it. And if somebody was using it as a residence 150 years ago and they had the money, they might have put it on, it would be appropriate somewhere with this style of architecture.
And I think on that particular project, the patio was approved for the 2nd story, which would be
Right.
the lower one, so which wouldn't be as visible.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
You know, I
but
was
he
just
also
talking
had
about that,
wanted,
And certainly, I was just in Old Hilliard 2 weekends ago, and I don't remember the bar name, it's Odie's, and it looks like New Orleans, because it's just covered in beautiful wrought iron balcony supports, but that's, you know, to redo that would be, if you wanna knock yourself out, I think that would be awesome, but that would be a gigantic financial undertaking to do
Yeah,
something.
well, I'm not looking to spend all my money, but when I look at it, I want to do, I wanna stay within the theory of the, preserving the architecture, but at the same time enhance it with something that somebody might have done at the day the building was made, they just didn't do it.
Right, but my point is that would be wrought iron,
Right.
right? It's not gonna be pressure treated wood or
The
cast
you're
aluminum
talking
or
about
anything
down
else.
there, that to me kind of demoralizes the whole program. That shouldn't be allowed.
Which one? I know what you're talking about.
On 22, I think it's the one that's not visible from the street, but is visible by everybody. So the concept of not being visible from the street is very limited in scope, because everybody that parks that's going to my building is going to be looking at that deck that you approved that's not gonna have wrought iron railing. Yeah.
The one you
So-
can see from BP.
Please?
Yeah.
You can see it from BP in the city
You can see it from
parking
everywhere.
lot.
I mean, anybody that comes to that block, they're gonna drive around the block, they're gonna see it. So being seen from the street is kind of relative concept.
Yeah, and so
My
that's,
deck.
yeah, when you put together your whole package, then the commission will be better able to answer your questions, because you'll have your illustrations and so forth, instead of talking, you know,
Right.
speculatively at this point, so,
Getting more baseline stuff.
yeah.
So, all right, well,
Okay.
taking enough of your time.
Well, thanks. Oh,
He might be able to answer this, but the standards, when we read them,
mhm.
does that, see, part of the building is transitional and part of it's downtown core?
It's all
So-
downtown core as far as I remember.
Well,
The-
Five
in
William
that,
Street.
right, it's a L-shaped building, so we always considered 4 North Sandusky to be in the core, and then 5 East William is in the
Oh, well, yeah,
transitional.
I forgot about that, it goes
Yeah.
through like that.
Oh,
Yeah.
So
So-
are there a different,
Yeah, so if you look,
are there a different set of standards for the
yes.
downtown core versus the transitional?
Yes, essentially the core is gonna be the strictest, right? So that is essentially the Sandusky corridor with the Italianate buildings. The transitional, and it's written, I only have some of mine with me here, but it breaks it down. So it's a little looser, not a lot, but a little bit, right? And then as you get further, then there's transitional residential, so there's different things. And you can just kind of think of that as radiating out from the core of the downtown area, basically.
I think the biggest difference is typically height and massing.
Right, because outside is usually a 2-story
Yeah.
outside in the transitional.
Yeah.
But I'll plug staff again, and volunteer them to work again.
Yep, we have been.
You know, the one thing, and a lot of us are from areas outside, lived here for quite some time, but, you know, Columbus and other areas, they're really good to work with. They're not adversarial, so please utilize them, whether it's Jerry Warner, building instructor, you know, Dave Epland, who's the planning director, or staff.
And
Yeah,
we
we're
have-
already taking care of it.
Good,
Yeah.
You're
okay.
on my hurdle now.
All right.
So,
All right,
Thank
All right.
you.
you're welcome. Thanks for
We are
coming.
excited to be here.
Good.
Glad to have
Very
you.
good.
Welcome project.
All right, so let's move on to 5B, regular business. We've got 2 things that have kind of been on here for a little bit, and one is discussions, fiberglass clad windows. The other one was more recent, and that's the expansion of the historic district overlay on the east side. So let's start with B1, which is fiberglass clad windows.
I'll start it off since I'm the one that instigated that.
Okay.
I think you all know how I feel about that, and I feel like this will open many doors for new owners, because a lot of buildings have exchanged hands lately in our downtown, and I respect what our commission does. And with that, I think many other historical commissions in other cities have implemented the fiberglass products that were brought to us, and I feel like as a commission, it would be a great thing that we change the standards to allow certain fiberglass windows.
Can you cite some of those so I can look them up?
It's actually in the last meeting,
Yes,
the
it's,
Marvin Window Company actually prevented,
Minutes?
Page,
Was it in our packet or
yeah,
minutes?
Yeah.
it's in the package on page 5 and then subsequent to that.
yeah, Marvin Windows actually was the manufacturer here. And he brought in, both the fiberglass and the wood clad window.
They were very nice.
Yes.
I thought that the quality was exceptional.
And I think city council even came up with a list of other standards that other commissions have that have approved certain fiberglass windows, and I think that we should implement that. Here's a sample right here. And the representative from Marvin Windows actually said that, he's the one that actually said that he's went to other commissions and spoke about the two different types of windows and, how there's different series, but they typically never change those either, cause I think that was the worry with the commission too, is are they changing these windows every other year?
And there were some that they couldn't replicate the style,
Yeah,
but then the owner could substitute with a different type of window that would fit that style they needed for a particular
Yeah, I think
spot.
rounded windows
Arched
are not
windows.
something they can do.
But, yes, and I guess
No.
they still, if the developer used those windows, they couldn't apply for the downtown
Right, 'cause they
facade
don't meet
program
the-
or whatever it is.
Right, they don't meet the state of Ohio standards.
But I don't think that's a problem, at least they have an option. Maybe the savings from the windows would not make them even want to apply.
and I think there's a longer life warranty on those,
Correct.
and he talked about how they're made and how the fiberglass, the color is within the entire window versus, you know, dealing with peeling paint in 5 to 10 years. So I think the longevity of the product is great too for our downtown.
I agree,
Mhm.
everything you said.
Do you have anything, Cynthia?
No, I
Or
agree.
Councilor Standpoint?
The only, minus that I've ever heard about the fiberglass is that the state of Ohio doesn't approve them.
Or
Right.
national standards.
Right, and, I feel comfortable with the due diligence that Victorian Village and, Brewery District, Short North, they've done to be comfortable with them in their historic buildings.
Yeah, I guess the one thing I would, and I know when we had the presenters here from Marvin, there was a differentiation between the
Mhm.
processes for some types of windows. So we've got a list here of what's been approved by, a number of the historic districts in Columbus, which is fine, but as they mentioned, the series changes a lot. So I think before we entertain adding something like this to the standards, we need to really zero in on the definition of which ones are actually,
Mhm.
built to last, and which ones are just kind of an economy version of a new, type of window, because, I think the last thing we wanna do is, if we don't have, the tools to differentiate when somebody brings a different model to us, and we don't know how to, vet that to ensure that it's properly constructed, then I think that could be a real problem. And I know somewhere I got some notes back home where, I took some notes of the presentation, but I think that's something, I probably don't have detailed enough notes. I think we really gotta, get that nailed down with some certainty.
Well, I think that was, so a couple of concerns, you just hit on one. None of us are qualified to do that, nor should we be, right? And so, I just got a mailer that Anderson's now making these things, right? Just came in the mail, so, a couple of things. One, we've always followed the Secretary of the Interior, the state follows that. I think we should continue to do that. This was brought up from one applicant, and even his contractor said it's not that big of a deal from a financial standpoint. And this feels like this is really being driven commercially from a manufacturer of these windows. And look, I'm in sales, I get it, I do the exact same thing. My concern is that, you know, all these very same things were said, for instance, about Hardy Plank. Well, Hardy Plank has a class action lawsuit where they've spent billions of dollars because they absorb water, swelled, and people are now having to have their houses resided. My boss happens to be one. By the way, their lifetime warranty, he got about, out of the class action suit, I think he got about 20% of what it takes to replace it, right? What has worked for 20 years here seems like it will continue to work. We allow the same as the US and the state standards, aluminum clad wood interior windows. And I guess I just don't see what's driving this other than the fact that we had one person here who was unhappy, and then we had a manufacturer guy in here putting a sales pitch on. And I'm not quite sure why that came into, oh, we gotta jump on board. We gotta get out ahead of this thing. You know, our windows are killing us downtown. We've had a very successful downtown for 20 years, and we've held all the other buildings owners to these standards. I don't see a reason to change that. We had a gentleman here tonight who's a building owner who basically is saying, when you don't hold people to higher standards, that affects him and his investment in his building. I think sometimes we forget that.
I would just like to add, I don't think the representative here was trying to pitch a sales. He was more cost approach to a building of 50,000 compared to maybe
Are you talking
20,000.
about the Marvin window guy or the contractor?
The guy from Marvin was asked to be here, so I mean, he
Right.
wasn't here on a sales call. I mean,
But he's a sales.
No, I understand that, but
That's what he does.
he came, you know, he basically came
No, I get it.
at our behest, so.
And he also mentioned when we were discussing both windows is the wooden clad, which, I mean, yes, with the archways, we're gonna have that. But he also said, if you wanna put a strap on manufacturers for fiberglass, you need to put a strap on wooden clad windows, cause you can buy a really junky wooden clad window as well. So if you're gonna do one thing and not the other for another standard, then I think it needs to be streamlined for both. And then now we look at wooden clad and say, well, now you have to be within these manufacturers because the other ones basically don't build a good quality window.
So you're saying the fiberglass is not really at issue, it's the quality, because you can get a bad quality aluminum
Yes.
clad wood.
Yeah, I mean, you can get bad quality anything, and it's, again, we don't have the expertise on this commission to determine quality. That's not what we do, which is why we follow the US Trust, which does have experts to be able to do that, which is why the state follows the US Secretary of the Interior, and why I think we should continue to follow those.
Yeah, but I mean, point of fact, the secretary, the Interior Department doesn't allow aluminum clad, do they? I know
No.
Ohio
They do.
does, but I
They
thought
do.
they did
Yeah,
not.
no, they do.
They did?
They do,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know how recent that was, it used to be wood, but.
Yeah, okay,
it's-
okay,
It's
I
been,
thought-
it's been several years, at
Okay.
least as long as I can remember.
Yeah.
So-
Any additional information on that?
Sure.
For 25 years, I was a commercial painting contractor, and I painted a lot of windows, easily over 1 million gallons of paint through my company. You can tell the difference between the acrylic or the vinyl and aluminum from a distance if you know what you're looking at. So that is a factor, although today they might have some that you can't. If you've got a 30-year-old window and you want to repair it, you got the choice, if something happened to it between fiberglass, vinyl, aluminum, steel, or wood, you're not gonna wanna deal with the fiberglass because, or the vinyl, because you just can't repair it.
Yeah, we don't allow
You can't
vinyl.
Fix it. And a lot of that stuff does work over time, it tends to shift. Aluminum, even though you got a crappy one, you can still band-aid it together. And the wood ones can always be repaired if you start out with a decent one. I mean, when it was here, in my building, 139 years old, and I looked into replacing them with aluminum clad, and I decided just to go with what I got, because when you look at the R value, yeah, there's, an extra R1 with a new window versus the ones I've got.
Yeah.
And I can repair these for another 100 years.
And they're also made out of old growth lumber that you can't.
Right.
I mean, even the pine looks like oak.
Good one or bad one, if you just got the junk pine now, it's not gonna last.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, so that's very important to me when I'm looking
Right.
around here, if you're gonna allow, something like a cheap pine window, aside from the idea of
encourage the original windows to be saved if at all possible, and most of them can be, right? It's like anything else, if you wanna spend the time and the money, and to your point, the insulation doesn't make a lot of difference. The sound can, and that's why some people with more, to your point, residential.
The research that I've done, the double pane windows and triple pane windows don't cut down decibels very much. And I actually have a decimeter in my truck, I check all the time around town here. That's another issue for more. So,
Okay.
I've chosen to keep the single pane and replace it with, tempered glass or laminated, and, just re-engineer the insulation. Channel room, which
Right.
is better than, that's, as a painter, I would rather not have to deal with the vinyl.
Yeah, well, just to be clear, so we don't allow vinyl. The fiberglass is a little bit different. It's still it's a man-made material, obviously, but it's not. So the vinyl windows are almost, even good vinyl windows are bad. And so we've never allowed vinyl windows, nor have any of the standards. This is something that's new, so reasonably new to the market. So it is, somebody else wants to take a stab. I missed the present, I know about them, but, so essentially it's almost, if you think of it like the way Hardy plank is made, right? It's the exact same sort of thing, where it has a pressed interior that's probably under vacuum or some sort of, clave or whatever those things are, that essentially molds it all together, assuming water doesn't penetrate, which is always the weak link in all of these things. If the outer skin is ruptured, then it penetrates, swells, and it has to be replaced. But so this is not a vinyl window. I will say from that standpoint, it's much, much better than a vinyl window. Other comments, Joe?
Yeah, again, I think at some point, I mean, I'm open to it, I'm just not sold on it yet, I guess
Okay.
is the way I would state it. I would like to see, some, evidence that these things are holding up, and I'm not even sure how long they've been on the market, if that even exists. But, at some point, if they are demonstrated, and and again, to your, using your Hardy plank, it was, the latest and greatest, and it was, lifetime warranty, but, as time went on, it wasn't what it was purported to be. I would, I guess my sense is, I would like to know more about the construction of them and get and what constitutes a quality one versus, the inferior quality ones. But also, I would wanna see some kind of track history, or track record of, how these things perform, how the colors hold up, do they, are they color fast, does the color fade, does it chalk, I don't know. I guess you can paint anything nowadays, except vinyl. But again, I think, so I guess, I'm not ready to say we should change the standards, but I do think we need to be open to changes if materials are developed that, there are plenty of synthetic materials, man-made materials that we now accept downtown, that weren't around, 100 years ago or 50 years ago. Maybe they were 20 years ago or 25 when the standards were built. But, at some point, if these things are proven to have a track record where they perform as well as a quality aluminum clad window, I think, at that point, I don't think there's any reason not to, to add them to the standards. I've not seen all of that, but I think that's what we need to start looking for and seeing if that's out there.
Okay.
So one thing I would add to this, coming into the conversation tonight, I was leaning more, and on a personal level, I tend to lean more toward the idea that progress sometimes is acceptable and good. But listening to the various comments, and reflecting back on over the years that I've been on this commission is 8 years now. One of the things that I think is our hallmark and is a strength of our commission is that we generally speak with one voice. And we generally have consensus. Yes, we have small disagreements over style and perspective, but fundamentally, we generally all see the same vision for the downtown and the application of the standards. And clearly on this issue, I see that there's a lot of divergent opinion currently. So my thinking on this is to kind of let this ride for a while. until, as you pointed out, maybe we need more time to take a look over another year or 2 years to see, what is the market saying about these products further on down the road? Because yes, there is a long history here of, well, we don't know how long, but there is a geography there that most of Columbus and the historic districts in Columbus seem to be okay with these, even though the state and national standards do not include them. And while I don't think we need to be completely beholden to those higher level standards of the state and national standards, that's something also to think about, is how much do we want to get ahead of something? Your cautionary tale, Mark, about hardy plank is an interesting one, I think, in that regard. And so I think to sum up, I think that's my thought on this. Maybe until we have a better sense of consensus, maybe we do need to hold off on this for a while.
Well, I would say we've been holding off on it since January. It's been a while, I don't know, do we hold off for 20 years to see if their 20-year warranty lasts? Or do we go with some progress? Give owners of properties another option. They can have wood, they can replace or fix what they have, they can do the aluminum clad, or they can have the vinyl.
Well, as far as how long it takes, I think, January, so we're talking, 9 months. So maybe it's not 20 years, but I don't think it's 9 months. I think that really needs to be a deliberative, measured process for making any changes to the standards. I think it's stuff that we have to look at, we have to discuss, we have to investigate, but we also have to have certainty that the decision that we're making is backed up by evidence that is a good decision. So I've not seen that evidence yet, so, I think it needs to be, I think that there needs to be more of a track record, and we need to get more information that these things actually will hold up.
Okay. So, Karen?
I'm fine continuing conversation about it.
Stephanie? So we've got a couple of options. We can remove it from the table. We can vote on it. We can remove it from the table. You can, I assume, Stephanie, you made the motion originally. You can withdraw the motion. I don't know if we want to leave it out there so it's out on the agenda every single month for the next whenever, but you made the original motion, Stephanie, so I'll let you decide how you want to proceed.
Well, I feel like I'll go ahead and make a motion that we continue this. We don't have a number here, did we? But for the fiberglass clad window, what do you guys say? Just have every month a discussion on it?
Well, if we leave it.
I don't really feel like it's gonna go anywhere if we continue on.
Well, and that's why I'm saying we may not want to leave it tabled. We may want to just actually, you can withdraw the motion and then you can make a new motion at any point, 6 months, 6 years, whenever.
How about I make a motion that we vote come January 2020?
I don't think you can do that. Why don't, in that case, since it is September, why don't we just leave it? And then it'll be on the agenda until January. And then assuming we have a council rep, we'll have 7 people. So we can just leave it as is, which means we're just.
So I'm not making a motion then?
No, we don't have to do anything, because it's already on there. We haven't taken it off the table. We've just discussed it. Okay.
Does anybody have any connections at the State Historic Preservation Office or the Office of the Interior?
Yes, you're
Yes.
right.
Could you have conversations with them or provide contact information so we can get their
Now, let's see if
specific
it's on their
stance?
radar.
Right,
Maybe
exactly.
they've done
Like maybe they're halfway there
research, yeah.
already.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's a good idea.
I'll contact my usual contact with Ohio History Connection and see if it's on their radar.
He was
Okay.
at one of our meetings. Doesn't he live right on Sandusky?
Oh,
I think you're right.
No, no,
He's a
no,
young
this,
gentleman. He was
this-
from Ohio.
well, this is a different office that
Okay.
we work with our grant programs.
So, also thinking of going in the other direction, I appreciate your comment, Kara, for sure. But also, man, we had an engineer come in, we had a representative of Marvin Windows. Have we ever reached out, I don't believe we have, to the historic commissions that are mentioned here in our, so I could say the Historic Preservation in Columbus, or if there's any other bodies I'm not familiar with, if they have a particular one just for, say, Victorian Village. That might be an interesting conversation to have too, to say, what was their deliberative process? And how did they come to the decision to say yes?
So that might, do you have contacts there? Because they're gonna be a volunteer board like
Right.
we are, so getting a hold of
Right.
actually members, but,
Yeah, I know the city of Columbus has a regular historian.
well, each, so, for
Right,
instance, there's
but-
a German Village German Village is a historic district, Victorian Village is a historic district. Someone, I would imagine, somewhere, there's someone on city staff that oversees those, so that we're not just
Right.
trying to contact.
I believe that, right.
volunteers.
There is one head
Okay.
historian with the city of
But to Aaron's
Columbus.
point, that'd be more valuable input to see what their,
Mhm.
what their experience has been so far.
Mhm.
Okay, 5B2, I think Mr. Coleman brought this up, expansion of the historic district overlay on or maybe to the east side of Delaware. I know not everybody was maybe at all these meetings. Joe, do you want to kind of talk about what you were?
Well, yeah, I guess, what I'm thinking, there is with, the development that is starting to happen on the east side, there are some pockets, adjacent to the existing, transitional district that are outside that contain actually some, pretty, unique architecture, which, I think would be contributing architecture.
Let me interrupt just a second.
Yeah, Chairman Hatton, this topic actually was discussed at the council meeting on Monday night. And
Okay.
at this point, council does not want to entertain moving forward with an expansion to the east side.
Who brought that forward at the council?
Well, they get the packet,
Okay,
so it's public record, and I
Okay.
send the packets to them, so
Okay.
they're aware of what's being discussed at all the meetings. Also, partially, one of the thoughts is they're in the middle of a comprehensive plan. They would like to see where that exercise takes them, and if there's a recommendation there also, and then come forward later with the discussion, so.
okay. Well, I think we can certainly still discuss it.
Yeah.
Because I don't think everybody was at the meetings. And I would agree in the sense, I don't know, do you have the map that you could project?
It
I
should
know
be
Joe has it, I
attached
just
to the
thought for
memo.
everybody. So, I know certainly there's some buildings up there in the train station, certainly being the most prominent of those. But the other thing to keep in mind, I think, is that, even buildings that aren't historic are in a transitional area, and if those get torn down, they can essentially just meet the zoning for the rest of the city and not the transitional district. And probably, certainly the train station is a historic building, so I could see moving out to protect that. And in that case, you would encompass some, some of the buildings on 42.
Yeah, and there's some buildings on Lake Street,
Mhm.
In addition to the train station that are outside the boundary that, I bet you they're Civil War era or maybe pre-Civil War. I mean, that's one of the older areas of the built-up town.
Yeah.
And they're, I'm not sure why those were left out to begin with, and then the other parcel that actually is of interest is right, catty corner to the train station where they took down the two structures, recently. I mean, if you just envision that, I don't know how I don't know if it would be appropriately zoned to put a gas station in there, but, everybody likes a gas station on the corner, and I mean, I just think, that's an area that's, could be another really good,
Right.
Enhancement to the historic district.
So actually,
and-
I'm wrong, the train station is in the transitional district.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I didn't realize that, that's my mistake.
Right, and,
The building on the corner of, that's, because we've talked about that, they've been in years ago, the old, was it a mill or something at one point?
The Flaxville.
is
Yeah.
for sale. No, I think it's.
So where are you looking?
Okay, where I'm looking is, let me get oriented here. All right,
There's
so
like-
we're central. Is this-
Right up here.
Okay, so, let's see, all right, Central Avenue. So if you look at these buildings right here, I think some of these buildings actually,
This guy.
um,
Wait.
so there are several buildings, I think, between, William Street and
I
Winter
think he
Street.
bought one of these.
that,
I
you
think
know,
this
kinda
is
caught
still
my
for
eye.
sale. He bought that. one.
Across from the depot on Potter Street, you know, I think there's some, I think one of the buildings there is one of the earliest, it's probably the oldest surviving fire station. You know, it's, you know, it's a brick building, it's, you know, unassuming, but, you know, it certainly has some historic interest.
Okay.
So I think this is probably Food Truck Depot right
It
here.
is, yeah.
You know, and again, I mean, I think they've done a nice job with it, but that is a historic structure that's outside. So, you know,
Right.
I just think, you know, we've got an opportunity to ensure that, maybe the positive development that has happened downtown in the core and the transitional district can be replicated there eventually, but just as easily, if nothing is done to protect that, you could have people, essentially with, current zoning and those areas that are outside the district right now, they can put up that, you know, essentially barn siding, that metal barn siding.
Right.
And we've had people approach us downtown that wanted to use that for their front facades in the downtown district. That can happen there.
Or they can be torn down.
Yeah, or they can be torn down and, you know.
So, thanks for the input. I think that it's important that we continue to bring these things forward. And, you know, I think council's going to default on the conservative side. But as Mr. Coleman just did, I think if we continue to do some research, I think we can at least present a valid argument. And maybe it doesn't, I don't know that we foresee it happening next meeting, but if the comprehensive plan, you know, those are the things that we need to push those forward to council.
Right.
Because they're probably not gonna come to us and say, hey, have you ever thought about expanding the district, right? So,
Can you answer for me, am I incorrect when I believe that all of the property owners have to agree that they want to be in? Okay.
Correct.
On that. Okay.
So one other question I have for staff then on this matter is, if right now council has stated on Monday that they don't have any interest in this time in even exploring this, but because of the comprehensive plan, I don't know if it's a question so much as a statement, I guess, is the idea is talking about the importance of historic structures, that can still work its way into the comprehensive plan, even if they were to try to develop this section of the east side in a different direction, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Mhm.
And so there's another point there of value in bringing out the importance of some of these historic structures, even if we don't talk about expanding the district itself, or if that is, as you probably rightfully suggested, a non-starter in the short term.
Yeah.
Maybe
And I-
down the road, maybe it will be, but.
Yeah, and I think one last kick of the dead horse from me, and then I'll shut up. But I do think it's interesting that, you know, we had a member of the community, a new member of the community, talking about his investment downtown, and one of the key things that's going to determine the extent to which he invests in that building, the amount he invests in that building, is an assurance that his investment is protected because the properties in the surrounding area are going to be held to the standard, they're going to be protected, which protects his investment. And I don't think, you know, that that point of view gets enough appreciation. So that's the end of it.
okay. Thank you. All right, staff comments?
Yes. I have two. First, the 2019 Heritage Ohio Annual Conference is being held October 21st through October 23rd in Newark this year. And if you're interested in That conference, you can go to their website, www.heritageohioconference.com. And then
Well,
today.
I'm sorry, what were the dates?
Oh, I'm
Or the
sorry.
date?
October 21st through the 23rd,
Thank you.
and that's in Newark.
Where's Newark? Never heard of that.
To-
Zanesville.
Nerk. I'm not even from Ohio and I know that. All right, anything else?
Yes, and secondly, today, the American Planning Association recognized
Yes.
historic downtown Delaware as a 2019 Great Place in America.
All right.
Yep, and there will be a local community celebration on Thursday, October the 17th at noon, and that'll be at 2 South Sandusky, where our new Rutherford B. Hayes Memorial will be going up. So,
Cool. All right.
Great place, oh, great place to
yep,
live.
right,
Uh,
and, oh, I'm
go
sorry,
ahead, nope.
and additional information on that award is at www.planning.org/greatplaces.
Great place.
And I believe it's on
Facebook.
the city's Facebook page, yes, that's where I saw
Yep,
it
on
today.
Facebook, right.
It's on the city's Facebook page. Yeah,
Right.
I gotcha. It's like,
And the Delaware Gazette had an article today,
yeah.
so.
What did you say?
The Delaware Gazette had an article on it today, too.
Okay. 7, commission member comments and discussion.
I just have one, is that I will not be in attendance at the next meeting, because I will be out of town for business.
All right, thank you.
And,
Wait a minute. Sounds like we will have a next meeting, our meeting next month.
yeah, and just,
Yes.
I will be in the same boat as him. I'll be traveling for work as well that week.
I will be in Florida.
Oh.
I hope
We
you're
may
doing
have
something
something
fun.
Better call
Sherry?
Kyle.
I think I'll be here.
Okay,
I have
good.
another question.
1, 2,
Okay.
3.
Oh, boy, we
Okay.
need 4.
Huh?
We need 4.
I won't be here.
Oh, well, and Stoltz.
Stoltz is, we're gonna
too.
come back.
So he's gonna cancel the trip.
You know, in the interest of, you know, not stalling their project, would it be possible that we might entertain having the meeting the preceding week? Is that
Before.
something that we can change the calendar with sufficient notification?
Council meeting.
Or can we have a special meeting?
Moving forward may be tough because your notification periods.
No, for my end, that's not an issue, I only need 48 hours notice to meet requirements for the state of Ohio. It would be more. having
Everybody else
staff
is.
To have his application in time and having the staff time to do their report, so.
So we could push back.
Maybe
That
the,
gets into election week.
Yeah,
oh,
November.
So, I just have to look at the calendar,
Okay.
because the next week after that would probably be a planning commission meeting
Yeah.
date, so,
Right.
or maybe
I-
Mr.
I don't have the, I
Yeah.
know kind of when all the meetings are, but I don't have the specific.
Well, we
dates.
might also be able to
Maybe-
impose on Kyle to, if he's not.
Mr. Rohr will be
And I'm
available.
hoping his, you know, he had intentions to be
Yeah.
here today, just.
Because you're gone, Stephanie, you said.
Yes.
So we would, if with Kyle, we'd have 4.
Correct.
Mhm.
And then, okay.
Okay, my question is.
Yes.
Speaking of canopies, in the standards, can you clarify this for me? It says new canopies are forbidden. But if it's an existing canopy that they wish to repair, does that mean it has to come down?
No, so it's,
Okay.
it's a little bit like signs, so we have one very large internally illuminated sign downtown, which
Mhm.
is not the standard. So can they replace the bulbs? Yes, and to Dan and his wife's point, they could paint that, I don't think we'd have a problem with that. But that sign, if it gets hit by lightning, you can't replace it, right?
What do you
So-
mean the sign? You mean the canopy?
No, I'm using a sign as an
Oh, the
example.
sign,
We have an
okay.
eternally illuminated sign downtown that's against standards.
Correct.
So it's grandfathered in, they can, you know, replace the bulbs, but they, and I guess it's.
Remodel it, basically.
Right, and so that was the thing with them, they could paint that, but it's in pretty bad shape, and once you start talking about putting a new roof, and new wood on it, you basically rebuilt the thing. So that's where that line
So,
lies.
so there's not much leeway for fixing.
It's maintenance, so it's a difference between maintenance and upgrades or major repairs. And I don't know,
Is it
we really
subjective
haven't
then?
gotten into those sort of, thankfully, minutia arguments. And part of it, remember, is unlike zoning, where you have to appeal to the court, you can appeal to city council here. So we're not maybe beholden to such legalese as you would be like on planning.
Okay.
Any other comments? I had one, and I've talked about this before, and I'm gonna try and do research, and I was having a hard time. And I brought it up today with the lighting standards. It's not the fixtures, it is the fact that LED lighting is becoming the de facto lighting choice. It's economical overall, they last forever. And that's fine. I have LED lighting in areas, and you get 2700 Kelvin, and they're nice, right? But the problem is you can also get 3000, 35, 4, 6, and we have some examples of that already. So it's hard to get into the minutia of that again, but I think at least if we have a standard, then code, or maybe if they're coming to you saying, hey, we want to put up some new fixtures, we can say, oh, by the way, you should have a 2700K bulb in there, type of thing.
Yeah,
Or not more than that.
Yeah, I think in the past, we have been letting people use the LED with that specification
Yeah,
that,
we don't have,
but
we don't have it
it's
written
not.
down anywhere, and I
yeah.
know there's a few examples that have gotten definitely into the white, blue end of things, which really looks bad in
Mhm.
our downtown. So I'll see if I can throw something on paper and bring, because rather than you guys just suggesting, at least if it's in the standards, you can say, hey, it's in the standards kind of
Mhm,
thing.
mhm.
Yeah, and I bet you most people that have put up the autopsy blue LED lights probably didn't really think it was gonna, necessarily be that, or didn't realize, that there is a range
Right.
of warmth, and so it's just like, oh, it's an LED, it's,
Yeah.
they're fine, but, I think that would be good to,
And then the problem is they last 6,000 years, and so they never replace them, All right, so any other comments, discussion? Okay, next regular meeting, hopefully, October 23.
Elections.
Actually,
We
can
were-
I make a nomination for?
Oh,
chair?
I'm sorry, yep,
Yeah, we have
we
to do
jumped
that.
ahead.
Move those.
Yep, so we're back to 2, which is election of officers. We need to elect a chairperson and a vice chairperson.
I would like to make a nomination for Erin Nicely to be our next chair.
I would second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Can you call the vote, please?
Ms. Herring?
Yes.
Mr. Nicely?
No.
Well, I guess I should have asked, are you willing to?
Accept
Do you
it?
want
That's what I
to?
was thought.
With respect and thanks, but no, I actually am not interested at this point,
Okay,
but thank you.
would you like to, we have a motion on the floor, would you like to withdraw the motion?
I'll withdraw.
Okay.
all right, well, I'll tell you what, I would like to move, the nomination of Mark Hatton for chair.
Have a motion, we have a second?
Second that.
Aaron, second. You call the vote, please.
Ms. Herring?
Yes, and
Mr.
just to be clear, when I said yes before, I thought that was putting him on the table, not that I was voting for
Yeah.
Aaron. Sorry, I didn't understand the process.
That's okay.
Okay.
Mr. Nicely?
Yes.
Ms. Riviera?
Yes.
Ms. Van Gundy?
No.
Vice Chairman Coleman?
Yes.
Chairman Hatton?
Yes. 2B, we need to elect a vice chairman. We have a nomination for vice chair.
All right, I'll nominate Joe Coleman.
We have a motion on the floor, do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second, you call the vote, please.
Ms. Herring?
Yes.
Mr. Nicely?
Yes.
Ms. Riviera?
Yes.
Ms. Van Gundy?
Yes.
Mr. Coleman?
Yes.
Chairman Hatton?
Yes. All right. So now, we are on to next regular meeting, October 23rd, 2019. Assuming that Councilman Rohr can attend that, we'll have a quorum. Anything else before we adjourn? If not, we are, I guess I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved?
So moved.
Second.
All right, and we are adjourned.
Thanks for coming.
Yep, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
A lot of work.